I know. All right, let's do it. All right, hi all. My name is Adam DeSorbo, a third-year MFA candidate here. On behalf of all of the third-year MFA cohort, we would like to thank Alec Soth for coming to the University of Oregon today. Alec is a photographer born and based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He has published over 30 books, including Sleeping by the Mississippi, Niagara, Broken Manual, Songbook, I Know How Furiously Your Heart is Beating, A Pound of Pictures, and Advice for Young Artists. Soth has had over 50 solo exhibitions, including survey shows organized by Jeu de Paume in Paris, the Walker Art Center in Minnesota, Media Space in London, and the Tokyo Photographic Art Museum. He has been the recipient of numerous fellowships and grants, including the Guggenheim Fellowship in 2013. His work is in collections at the Getty Museum in LA, the LACMA, the MoMA, Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago, Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, the SF MoMA, and the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York City, to just name a few. In 2008, Soth created Little Brown Mushroom, a multimedia enterprise focused on visual storytelling. Soth is represented by Sean Kelly in New York, Weinstein Hammons Gallery in Minneapolis, Fraenkel Gallery in San Francisco, Loock Galerie in Berlin, and is a member of Magnum Photos. Please welcome Alec Soth.
Very good. Hello, hello. Thank you so much. And thanks to Adam and Gracie for schlepping me around town, picking me up at 11 o'clock last night. Adam always rides in the back seat for some reason. What I want to talk about today... Whoa, sorry. That was really weird. What I want to talk about today is always being a beginner, and trying to keep that beginner's mind, which is my goal going forward. And some of you are more at the beginner stage of things, and it's such a challenging time but exciting time. And so I'm just going to take you through my early beginning stages, and then different moments where I've tried to begin again, essentially. This is the beginning stage. This is photo 1 class. Classic. Doing the self-timer picture. So we all know this, right? That I click the self-timer, I run into my garage and act like I'm just being caught on the camera. It's so innocent, and I feel like, how many people here have taken photo 1? Can I see a show of hands? How many people in photo 1 took a mirror picture or a self-portrait? Come on. Yeah, there we go. There you go. It's such a strong desire, which is really funny when you think about a camera being a way to look out in the world, but a lot of us secretly want to be looked at, or at least thought about, or something like that. So I think that's embedded in the experience for a lot of us. For me at that, one thing I should also say about it is that a lot of people who I think are attracted to photography crave that a little bit, but they don't want to be looked at. They don't want to be on stage. They don't want to be the center of attention, but they a little bit want it. And in my own case, I was very, very shy at this age, and one of the things that drew me to photography was working alone and just wandering around at night. And it was at that time period that I discovered this book, Summer Nights by Robert Adams, which is really it's just him wandering around alone at night. And there is a slight voyeuristic quality to the pictures, where he's kind of peeking in windows and such, which attracted me as well. Oh. Yeah, no worries. Oh, there's all sorts of funny stuff happening up here. Then I encountered this book by Joel Sternfeld called American Prospects. I guess it's worth noting that so much of the way I experienced photography at first was in book form. And so it became the kind of primary format for me. But I had the chance to see Joel Sternfeld give a lecture, and it was a college lecture. It was very similar to this. And he showed this picture, which is not one of his best known photographs, but he pointed down there and he said, that was my car that I drove around America in, photographing the US. And there was something about that really hit me, which is the idea of the process was so exciting to me. Even the idea of Robert Adams wandering around at night, this idea that you could make a life driving around the country looking at things was exciting. So I ended up studying with Joel Sternfeld, and it was interesting because I then wanted to do that kind of work, basically. And he did not want people doing that kind of work. It was kind of it was implied, I guess. And so I did things like, so strange, there's like a pause to the pictures. So I did things like this. Terrible. Stayed, like in a studio. So that was my dad on the right in a hairdryer. These slide backdrops, not good. But I got a pat on the back. I got a lot of encouragement for this work. Be careful about encouragement, like taking it in. Because sometimes it's very powerful. You're like, oh, I'm good. I'm going to do this. But I knew deep down, I could feel that it wasn't the thing I really wanted to do. And so it was during spring break. This would be in my junior year spring break. I decided to go on a Mississippi River trip since I was away from college, and I could work in that sort of way. And so I, with my girlfriend, we drove down as far as Memphis. I think it's funny that I took a picture of my van. I'm sorry, I'm not hitting buttons. There's something funny's happening here, but I think I wanted to communicate my process even then. So this was Rachel, who I am married to all these years later. And that was a really magical trip, and it felt so good to make that kind of work. And it's what I wanted to do. I still went back to college and did other kinds of work, incidentally. Now, the big thing I didn't do on that trip was photograph strangers, because I was terrified. I loved all those photographers like Dan Arbus and Ouija. Turn off my camera here. But it was too scary. There's this, I now have an audio clip by Ouija. Let's see if this will play. Oh. Boy, I tell you, we had everything working.
So you have a
Oh, there it
camera.
goes.
You make good pictures, everybody likes them. But you have to get out of the class where you only photograph your friends and relatives indoors. That's very nice. But if you want to do it professionally, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't. Go out and photograph strangers. I know you're afraid to do it at first. I was scared stiff myself. But you have to do it. And most people like to be photographed. They consider it an honor to be picked out of a big crowd. In other words, you can't be a nice Nelly and do photography.
So, I decided not to, and sorry about there's kind of a green cast to some of these pictures. We did the best we could. So I decided to try to not be a nice Nelly. This is after I graduated from college, and I thought, I'm not even going to do a project. I'm I'm just gonna go out and teach myself how to photograph strangers. And this was one of the first ones because she seemed not scary to me. And it's funny now because like now photographing a girl in a park is like the most terrifying thing I could do. But I learned to approach different types of people. You know what's interesting about this, just from a color perspective, is that it's green on the bottom and not on the top. We're going to enjoy that gradation. And then I was starting to get a sensibility was developing. And so after I had a general undergraduate degree, general Bachelor of Arts, and which didn't give me all the possibilities in the world. So I ended up working in a darkroom. It was like one of those places where you drop off the film at the lab or whatever, and they send it off. And so it was a round-the-clock place, and I was very unhappy. Worked there for years, and so I was spending a lot of time at bars. And I decided to kill two birds and start photographing in bars. I had an exhibition of this work. It was my first exhibition 30 years ago. But I knew it wasn't expansive enough as photographing people in bars. So I had bigger visions. And so then I did this series. This one's hard to explain. So I'm showing you failed work or work that got me to the next place. So I had this idea of doing, I called it pretentiously lyrical typology. So little typological studies, different things, and putting them together. So pilots on the telephone was one thing. Sheep were another thing. How were these things connected? They were connected in my brain through kind of free association, which led me to a sleep research lab because I had this thing about like counting sheep, the wires from the phones and the pilots. Doesn't really make sense, but I had an exhibition of that work called Portraits, and I knew it wasn't quite the right thing either. This is a little video clip. This is Ira Glass talking, and I feel like this is one of the wisest things I've ever heard about being a younger artist, and it was certainly something I felt at that time.
Nobody tells people who are beginners, and I really wish somebody had told this to me, is that if you're watching this video, somebody wants to make videos, right? And all of us who do creative work, we get into it, and we get into it because we have good taste. Do you know what I mean? Like, you want to make TV because you love TV. You know what I mean? Because there's stuff that you just love. Okay? So you've got really good taste, and you get into this thing that I don't even know how to describe, but it's like there's a gap that for the first couple of years that you're making stuff, what you're making isn't so good. Okay? It's not that great. It's really not that great. It's trying to be good. It has ambition to be good, but it's not quite that good. But your taste, the thing that got you into the game, your taste is still killer. And your taste is good enough that you can tell that what you're making is kind of a disappointment to you. You know what I mean? Like, you can tell that it's still sort of crappy. A lot of people never get past that phase. A lot of people at that point, they quit. And the thing I would just say to you with all my heart is that most everybody I know who does interesting creative work, they went through a phase of years where they had really good taste. They could tell what they were making wasn't as good as they wanted it to be. They knew it felt short. And some of us can admit that to ourselves, and some of us are a little less able to admit that to ourselves. But we knew it didn't have this special thing that we wanted it to have. And the thing I would say to you is everybody goes through that.
So I was in that gap, and it was like an 8-year gap, I would say. The big thing is that I wanted my approach to be open and expansive. I didn't want to just photograph one subject in this strict documentary sort of way. So I even at that time made my business card this as a way to sort of tell people that I'm open to it all. Somewhere around that time, I found a book that had Robert Frank's Guggenheim application for the Americans in it, and it's really an interesting way he applied, and I guess did I say Robert Frank or did I say Walker Evans? Because Walker Evans actually wrote this text supposedly, but the project I have in mind is one that will shape itself as it proceeds and is essentially elastic. That's what I wanted. I wanted to just find itself and have this kind of stream of consciousness quality. And so I developed another project, and I'm still in the gap here, and it was called From Here to There, and it's very strange. And so the idea was that one picture leads to the next. So, and this is also the time at which, so the internet is now a thing, and web surfing was very exciting. So hot links, hyperlinks were very exciting. And I had this idea of functioning like that, but in the real world. So this boy with this egg and the soup. Sorry, things are just flipping without my touching it. Yeah, so the boy with the chicken, the boy with the egg, Superman suit, etc. The thing about this is that those links were too obvious and they were too close together. And the pictures were, they felt too much like illustrations, and so then I switched color and I started making the leaps between the pictures bigger. So this is at the world's smallest church. It's in Spillville, Iowa. And then I went to another world's smallest church in Iceland. And then I found myself at this location, many steps in between, but I was there. This is Charles Lindbergh's boyhood bed. Charles Lindbergh made the first transatlantic flight. He's from Minnesota, where I'm from, and there was something about the idea of this boy in a bed. I always had this thing about sleeping, like the sleep research lab people, and this porch overlooks the Mississippi River, and I thought, oh, what if I made the Mississippi River the kind of metaphor for the links between the pictures, but I still worked in this wide open kind of way. And so then I got rid of the Iceland pictures and so forth, and started working exclusively along the Mississippi River. But the spirit of the work was the same. So this picture of this guy Charles with the planes, to me, is very much linked to Charles Lindbergh and the bed. But it's not obvious, and because it looks like it's about the Mississippi River, people aren't necessarily making all those associations. Or they're not looking for the gimmick of the link between the pictures, basically. So that gave me a structure for working that was wide open. And this is the time period at which I felt like the gap was closing, but also there was an important thing, which is that I didn't really care as much about what people thought. And I talked a little bit, I had some great grad conversations this morning. And of course, school generally, particularly graduate school, is a time of like neuroticism. You're like, you've got a committee, and you've got to think, and you got to defend, and all this stuff. And there's all that. And I didn't go to graduate school, but I felt that way in school. And now, like many years have passed, no one cared about my work. And there was one upside of that was like, oh, I can do whatever I want. It doesn't matter. There are no rules. And like, it's by the Mississippi River, but if I'm like an hour away from the Mississippi, I can still take a picture. I'm not breaking the law. And so I felt really free. And this work was, in many ways it was about that feeling of freedom, of course, and it like referencing, Huck Finn and all of that stuff. This picture was an important one for me because I stopped here for no reason. So I didn't have a link. There wasn't a big idea in my head. I just thought it was beautiful. I actually think I know of ways that it is linked for me. I don't have to go into them, but that was part of the freedom I felt at that point. I didn't have a committee that I had to defend my work to. I also felt at this particular time really fearless. So there had been a death in the family before this particular long trip, and it just put everything in perspective. So I just felt unafraid of approaching people. And often what I would do is I would have them write down on a sheet of paper what their dream was. And I gathered these as part of the project. I accidentally left it in that picture. Maybe it wasn't an accident. I don't know. But that became part of it. Whoop, hello. Sorry. This is Johnny Cash's boyhood home. And so repeating motifs, beds. I actually kind of, in my mind, that was like Huck Finn's raft. This is, so that list on my business card, like lists are something that many a photographer uses, and these kind of, for me, I think of them as like, it's a brainstorming list, but it's almost like a treasure hunt. And so I have a list of things I'm looking for, and it just keeps my mind in the game. So it might be mattresses, it might be airplanes, various themes sort of emerge over time. This kind of interesting story. So how do I get into people's houses? How does that work? Sometimes it's very fast. Sometimes it's a long process. This one was long. I had been driving in this town in Mississippi, and there were a bunch of churches, and they were kind of grand historic churches. And then there was a little church at the end of the street, and her husband was out working out front. And they invited me to a prayer service that evening. And I went to that service, and it was funny because she was just, like, he was the preacher, but she was just such a force, and she was kind of, praising God, but like stomping him out while she did it. And so then they invited me back to their house, and I see this picture of a cloud in a frame, and it makes me think of a William Eggleston picture. He photographed clouds. And I was really taken with it. And then she saw that I was taken with it. And we were sitting at this table having coffee, and she kept nudging it towards me. And she was like working on me. And I think of this portrait as like, it's like an arm wrestling match in a way. Like I'm trying to get something from her, and she's trying to get my soul. And and there is William Eggleston. This wasn't formally, this isn't in the book or anything, but I did visit him in Memphis. Obviously a big influence. Also just people living their lives in alternative ways. And I should note that I did not live my life in an alternative way. So I always had a job. I was able to get a leave of absence for this longer trip, but lived a fairly very conventional lifestyle. Okay, so then, like I said at the beginning, books were the form for me. They were the ultimate form. So I wanted to make a book. Inkjet technology had arrived. It was quite exciting. It was easier to make something. So I had an exhibition of that From Here to There work. That's the booklet in the upper left, which is full of text and the stories about the connections between the pictures. Then I made the middle top one, in which there's a typo on Mississippi, which I think is funny. And then, because having no reputation, but having this new technology, I thought, I'll just make my own book. And I made 30 copies of the one in the upper right. And then all sorts of magical good things happened around that time period. And I got attention for this work, and suddenly it got published, and different editions of it existed. And and then I was off on a whole new world of making. I'm not going to take you through all of the work I did after that, but I'm going to take you through a shift. So then I was having exhibitions in galleries. I had to navigate that whole universe. I did not have an advanced degree, and so teaching was not a viable route for me. So I decided this art thing is not going to last. So I'm going to, as a backup plan, I'm going to be a working photographer. And so I started doing jobs. And this was one of my first big travel jobs where I went to China. And I really did not do a good job on this, I feel like. So I had to stumble my way through it. And then I got better. And so a number of years later, I went back to China as part of this 4-part series for the Telegraph, and I got better at it. And this was the part of it that is very different than doing personal work. This is more the craft side of things, I guess. So when Ira Glass talks about that gap, some of that gap is technical. It's just the skills that you acquire through doing something over and over again for years. And actually doing these assignments made me much faster and proficient. So because if you work for a magazine, you have to come back with a picture. And you can't really have an excuse. And so it made me better. This is a disaster of a photo shoot. I didn't know what I was doing. And this is one of these things where there was 15 people on the set, and the picture's not even sharp. It's just embarrassing. But I got better at this kind of thing, and I learned how to find my own voice. So I did this entire fashion magazine of my pictures, and I was able to make it half in Paris and half in Minnesota, and thus impart some of my own voice into it. So this is Chanel in Paris and Chanel in Minnesota. And did more and more editorial work and got better and better at it. Now the danger of this for me is that over time you aren't a beginner. And if you get too good at this, and then you start learning shortcuts. I have a whole bunch of tricks for if there's not a situation where I can get a picture, I can still get a picture. And that stuff is dangerous, because if that bleeds into your artwork, then you're not a beginner anymore. You don't have that spirit. So it was around this time when I was getting proficient in a professional way that I developed Little Brown Mushroom. And so Little Brown Mushroom, the idea of it was playtime, experimentation, and also collaboration. Because photography for me, as I told you, I got into it because I was a loner. But then once I started doing it, all of a sudden I'm working with publishers and editors and gallerists and designers and all these people, and I see creative potential in that, and it's kind of exciting and fun. but I thought it'd be fun to do it on my terms and not in a commercial way at all. So like this is one of the first books that we did, and so this was with the photographer Trent Park, but it's all pretty much all the books that we did incorporated text and image. This whole series in the middle here are like designed like little golden books for children, and published a number of books, and then we started getting better at that basically, and it started turning into a real business, at which point I knew I needed to change it again, because this was supposed to just be the sandbox. So then I started getting into education and kind of events. So I was interested in the narrative potential of the artist talk, because at that point I'd been giving a lot of artist talks, and I thought, oh, there's a creative possibility in this that isn't being exploited. I wasn't doing anything about it, but I thought, I'll bring all these artists to Minnesota and instruct them to tell stories and to create a story, and then in front of an audience they had to do it. And it was really a magical time period. Then after that I started doing some things along those lines. I did a couple different collaborations. I did a crazy thing for TED that was not, that did not feel like, it was too scary because it was like the big TED thing. But probably the most satisfying one was this, where I collaborated with this musician Dave King on the left, and this happened. We started this idea right before COVID hit, and then COVID happened, and we were just screwed around during COVID, inventing this thing where he played music, and then I'm on stage, live in front of an audience, with a camera pointing down at my hands, manipulating pictures or telling stories. So and we had a number of songs essentially. This particular song was a more narrative-ish one where I'm reading stories about the pictures. And then others that were really experimental. So I'll just show you a clip of the experimental one. So anyway, doing all of this kind of stuff, I think of it as a balance to the commercial work or the editorial work. It's like if I start doing too much of that, I need to do this other thing to balance it out and to feel free and open and to remember how to be a beginner. And I've done lots of like really nutty things like that are, kind of embarrassing, but I also know how they got me somewhere. One interesting thing that came out of that collaboration is that I built that setup and I had it during COVID. And so then at that time I thought, I could do Zoom talks on YouTube basically, or online, in which I talk through books basically. And so then I made a YouTube video, and posted that, and then people got into these YouTube videos, which is kind of amazing to me because they're quite long, and that became a really, like, it feels like a Little Brown Mushroom activity, in that it's sort of experimental and fun, and I learned a lot. One funny thing about the YouTube videos is that then they became kind of popular. And then once people started liking them, it became harder to do them because it started turning into another thing I felt like I had to do. But I think I'm over it, and I'm making them again. Education, I keep wanting to do things in education. I had my high school art teacher completely changed my life, and I want to give back in that sort of way, and so it's been a long process of trying to find my way through in education. And weirdly, the YouTube videos are one of the best ways. But another piece of the desire for education too is to be in contact with that beginning spirit, basically. And so I was really interested in working with teenagers. This is before I had a teenager, so I felt a little different after. But we did this. Oh, sorry. I've been talking and there's not a screen. It's not up there. This is called the Winnebago Workshop. And so what we ended up doing is recruiting this group of kids, and we would then do these small little journeys, and then eventually we did a cross-country road trip, and they were making work along the way. It wasn't just photography; it was various media, and they were doing pop-up exhibitions and talks and different things, and it was pretty cool. More recently, I created this, which is a workshop now in my house. And this is my one. I'm basically doing advertising right now. So we did 2 of these workshops last year. They were super great. And we just launched the next one. And so you can go to littlebrownmushroom.com to find out about it. I'm going to now show you a video that one of our scholarship recipients last year just made about the workshop here.
Hello, today I woke up from this crazy dream. Can you imagine that I have been learning about this photographic guy my whole life, all my university? You know who? It's Alec Soth. And in my dream, I end up in his house in Minnesota in the States. Can you imagine this? This doesn't seem so crazy. And we were like a group of 10 people, 10 crazy, like wonderful, great artists I ever seen. Can you imagine this? This is like a dream. This is like a dream. And we spent time in his home. It was like 4 crazy days. We ate breakfast together. We have a pool time. We were talking about the photography all the time, playing with the edition, like a dream. Can you imagine that? We even met the Alec family.
Why?
And his parents. Can you imagine this? Like, you are sitting around at a table with parents of Alec Soth, and they are telling you like the very funny stories about him when he was young and what he was doing. Can you imagine this? And you know what is the weirdest thing ever? This wasn't a dream. This was real! Can you imagine? This is so surreal. Come on, let's go do this crazy workshop, go to the States, and there's also the chance to do it with the scholarship. Do it, come on, this is the craziest thing could ever happen in your life. Bye!
Kisses and greetings from Poland. Bye.
So yeah, half the people were from outside the U.S., and it was really cool. Okay, these are the various publications I've done over the years. These are really the real one, like the main ones. And everything in between, not everything in between, most of the in-between things are those like experimentations, trying to figure out a new path, trying to find my way. And some of them aren't as good or whatever, but because it's funny because I on my Wikipedia, it says I have published 25 books or whatever, but it's not really 25. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 real ones. And this is the most recent one. And I'm just going to check the time. So this book, Advice for Young Artists, is thinking about all this stuff, about beginning again, what it was like to be a beginner, can I feel that still, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm going to tell you how it came to be. So, like I said, I'm a working photographer, and I got a job from a magazine probably no one's heard of called Re-Edition magazine, and it's a fashion magazine. And they asked me to do, it was a series of pictures. This is, just to give you a technical term, this is called advertorial. I don't know if you've ever heard of this before, but there's like editorial, which is like working for a magazine. There's advertising. This is in between. So like a brand, in this case Bottega Veneta, pays to have an editorial spread in a magazine. It's basically how all the fashion magazines work. Anyway, you can have a lot of creative freedom actually in that sphere. And the only thing that they said as a starting point is, we saw that you took a picture years ago at a horror convention, like a horror film convention, at a little like sort of suburban hotel conference, basically. And what if we did a fashion shoot at a horror convention? I was like, that sounds amazing. I would love to do that. And so then, and I was able to do it in Minnesota, which was cool. And so then I went about the casting, finding real people that would be the type to go to a horror convention, basically. And I have to find them in advance because we have to have them fitted for the clothes and all this stuff. And I found them, and everything was all set up. And then kind of towards the last minute, the convention said, no, we actually don't want you to come. And there's a big problem. So then I had to think fast, and I had this idea of renting this Airbnb that was kind of near the convention. And it was really big, but really dated. And I had this idea of having this party with these people there, a kind of party. And my thing about like horror people, sort of more specifically goth people, because I've done things, sort of goth stuff over the years. I'm interested in people who identify as loners, but want to connect with other people. I don't know why I feel that way. And so, like, this idea of a party of loners, I really liked. And so we did this. Oh, wow, I skipped a lot of things. Oh, right. Then, okay, the job was done, it was published, and I learned from it, and I thought, oh, wouldn't it be great to do this, but not have the fashion component now, and just do it on my own, and have loner parties. And so then I had an assignment in Kentucky, and with my assistant I said, okay, let's go to Kentucky, and we'll do the assignment, and then when it's done, we'll stay there, we'll rent an Airbnb, and we'll throw a loner party. And so then we get there. I have a really hard time finding a good Airbnb that's going to work for this. And then was the problem of finding the loners. Because all of these people, we could approach saying, oh, we're going to pay you money, and you're going to be in a fashion magazine. To just approach someone saying, like, hey, you look lonely. Like, do you want to come? It did not work. But this was in Kentucky, and this guy, I was just out and about, and this guy rode up to me, and he actually weirdly recognized me, and had been a photography student. And I had a really nice encounter with him, took his picture. There was no loner party. And something oh yeah, and then what happened was in Kentucky, I thought, okay, here's a way I could approach people. I could go to the local university and I could say, in exchange for me giving a talk or visiting, could I have access and ask people if they could come to this party? And so I did that. They weren't really interesting people, though, as it turns out. In that way, they were interesting people. They just didn't look right. So then I decided on the drive home to go to a university in Tennessee, and I did this again. And like that's where I took this picture. But around this time, I was like, oh, maybe I'm not interested. Maybe it's not the loner party. Maybe I'm interested in these art students. And so just kind of following my intuition. And so then I started a little project of going to art schools. But I decided to change my approach because the pictures, these last two pictures, they're soft and romantic, and they're kind of like, I like them, but they were too soft for me. And I wanted a different kind of energy. That was maybe closer to those party pictures. So then I started photographing with a flash and with digital, and then it became this other project. The thing that started happening, though, is so that, and don't worry, I'm not doing this at your school. So, but basically, what would happen is that like Ron might invite me, and I would do my obligation, and then I would ask if I could sneak off, and then I would basically go out in the school and role play that I'm a young artist. I would pretend that I was one of you. And I would make still lives and goof around in the studio and just get away with stuff. And I started having a blast doing things like this. Okay, so same time I was thinking a lot about Walker Evans. So Walker Evans, very famous for his photography, but most of it's from early in his life. And then he a little bit petered out there in the middle period. And then late in life, he became a beginner again. He was handed this Polaroid camera, and he got really excited about it. And most of the pictures you see of Walker Evans Polaroids, they look like Walker Evans pictures, signs and things like that. But he took all these other pictures that are amazing, and they're pictures of students at schools that he was visiting. And there's something really desperate about them too. It's like he's this broken old man, and he's like trying to like get this energy from this camera, and he's so close to them. And I found them very poignant. And so that became kind of a way of working. I mean, I don't identify with Walker Evans in many ways, but I like this work. And also I love that there are all these pictures of Walker Evans himself. He's not taking self-portraits necessarily. I think the camera's just being handed to someone or what have you. But I really wanted to put myself in the work, basically. And so these pictures are kind of complicated. So for the photographers here, it's funny because I realize now out in the world that a lot of people have no idea what's happening in this picture. But for those of you who aren't photographers, that's like a bulb to trigger the camera, right? The thing is, if you understand how I'm taking this picture, I'm taking it with a digital camera, so that's not actually functioning here. The story of this is, at this particular school, I visited a critique. This woman had the classic self-portrait picture with the bulb, and she was on the ground like that. I was like, oh, that's amazing. Could we recreate that photograph? And so we went out in the hall and started recreating it. But then I snuck into the picture. So that's me in the background, and I'm actually triggering the camera while I'm doing this. So there's this like self-consciousness in all these things, but and it's staged, but it's also incredibly chaotic. So something similar is going on in this. And I have to say, part of the newness for me was working with a digital camera in this way. So it's always this thing when I talk about this work that I can feel half the audience just like deflated when I say digital camera. You know who you are. But for me, there was something thrilling about using it in a different way. And this picture is one example because like I learned about focus stacking, which I'd never done before, which basically you take like 75 pictures focused at different points along the image, and then you mash them together digitally, so having this infinite depth of field. And I got interested in that, and then at the same time I was interested in putting myself in the picture. How am I going to do this? I'm sneaking around to school. Suddenly the flash is going off 70 times. I'm running around to be in the picture, but I'm all alone, and I'm having just a really fun time playing. I'm playing, basically. So I felt really alive doing it. This is a picture I took at RISD. I'm not doing this today with you, but something is hovering right here. Okay, so the book is called Advice for Young Artists. It doesn't have advice in it, or the advice it has is so minimal. Like, it has these post-its in it, like this one says patience, etc. Like, be patient. It's like so half-hearted. I mean, really the advice is to be a beginner. Like, I feel like I want your energy. Give me that. Accept yourself is legitimately good advice. Because I was worried that people weren't going to feel like they got their money's worth out of the book. So I put in all this advice. This is from Sister Carita Kent. This is how it's normally seen. So she was an artist and also a photographer. It was a really good book of her photographs published recently. And so I was looking this over before this talk, and I was like, rule number 4, consider everything an experiment. That's a good one for me. Number 8, don't try to create and analyze at the same time. They're different processes. That's really good. And all this stuff about breaking rules. So I thought I would end this talk by doing an experiment. Because I'm experimenting with something right now, which is this camera right here. I mean, it's a Fuji camera, but so this is a spotting scope. It's used for like bird watching and things like that. And I've been playing with one of these. Like during COVID, I was playing with binoculars, which are amazing to look at if you've really not spent time with them. But I would take my iPhone and put it on binoculars and look at the world. And it was really fun. But I'm only using half the binoculars. So then recently I thought, a spotting scope. And then I learned I could connect my camera to the spotting scope. And I got excited about that. And playing with different things. And then during my talk with Kate here in the grad program, we were talking, and this was my last crit of the day, and I was talking about how I recently experimented just goofing around in my hotel room, and I made a camera obscura. And I was sharing the experience of that and talking about how I'm really into round images and how we see in a circle and all this. Kate was like, oh yeah, I'm so into that. And I have these lenses, and I've got this Fresnel lens, and I've got this lens. And I was like, oh great, can we play with them right now? She had class, they weren't there. So she brought them. I've not seen them, but you brought them. And I want to just, for a moment, goof around with these lenses and this camera. And what I'm going to do while you get those out, so I'm going to turn on this, close this, somewhere. So this guy, Hi back there. Sorry. The thing is, yeah, Kate is far too close for me to focus on her. So let me just see what you got going on here. So you need to wear gloves to touch it, huh? Thank you. So in one of my newness, like my become a beginner again phases, I went to India to study laughter yoga, and then I told the laughter yoga instructor, I said, because I had a lecture after I got home to Minnesota. I said, when I go back to Minnesota, I'm gonna give a lecture, and I'm gonna start it by only laughing. That was brave. So this is nothing. Okay. Oh wow. So, oh my God, that is okay. So then, can you go in back and kind of just hold this, I guess, in front of your face, just as a starter.
All the way?
Let's go back there because I really need to be far away.
There's this one too.
Oh yeah. So what does this one do? Upside down.
There's one side too.
Can you guys see this? Is it doing anything for you?
We can see the projection through it.
Oh, Kate, are you seeing what's happening here? Look at that reflection. If you haven't ever made a camera obscura, I highly recommend it. Because I was like, it took me 55 years to ever try doing this. It's the coolest thing ever. Okay, so you're back there. It's hard to find your subject. So, whoa. Wait a second. Okay. So I need, if I can get how can I communicate your eyeball? No, look through it. Look through it. Oh, wait. Just move it incrementally towards me, like up to your right. Yeah, and right there. Look at that. Let me focus that. There's not autofocus on this thing. Ooh. I don't know if this is going to work because I have it set for flash right now. Oh yeah, wrong exposure because I'm on manual right now. Before we do anything else, I'm going to do a little test with the flash here. Oh, I got to turn this on. We're not on the eye, but I just want to see what happens. Ooh. Can you, yeah, a little lower now, just a touch lower, right there. Look at that. I'm doing eye exams from across the room. Okay, now I need to do it without flash. So I think I can go to aperture maybe. I don't know. Ooh, okay, I'm going to crank this thing up. Let me just see whoa, hello. I got to turn that up. Sorry, I gotta look at this software is really goofy. It's like to see the picture. Okay, so I'm bright there. Okay. Oh, just a little lower. Right there. Okay, so I'm way too dark. Why? I haven't really figured out how to control exposure yet. Why is it so dark? My ISO's crazy. Oh, my shutter's... Oh, it's on manual again. Wait. Okay, way too dark. Okay, that showed up. Okay, lower. Oh, right there. Did I get it? Oh, look at that. Okay, I'm going to go over here. This. Kind of beautiful. Like, isn't it interesting? I have been photographing eyeballs as part of this too. So I had no idea. Like, when she said she had this lens, I had no idea it did that. So I'm very excited. I just want to make sure I nail it. So a little low, wait, right there. A little lower. Yeah, right there. Let me try that version. Let's see if this, did I get it? Oh no, why is it so dark now? Oh, because it went back to manual. Do you see that? What's up with that? Maybe if I take this and I go, what do we think here? Oh, we're getting there. I mean, that is a very high ISO. I'm gonna try one last time. Sorry, I know. Oh, that was good. A little to the right. Yep. A little bit more. Right. A little less. Right there. How about that? Let's give a big round of applause. So we can turn on the house lights, and if there are questions, we can ask questions. I know all about photographing eyeballs from across the room. Any questions? Yes.
So, it was really interesting to hear your words about photography and all of the experiences that you had in photography. You are thinking about photography, writing about photography, presenting your work in exhibitions, photo books, NFT, social media like YouTube. So it's like that you are trying to keep your so fresh in the area of thinking of photography. Regarding the AI and how we are generating photos and how we are consuming photography in social media and the way of behaviors has changed regarding towards photography. Has anything changed in photography, or will it change in future? What's your your thoughts about the future of photography? How do you think that our perspective can change?
Yeah, I mean, so the fact that photography being linked to technology is something that I find very annoying a lot of the time because and I always daydream, wouldn't it be great to be a writer and you're just thinking about words and you're not dealing with technology because it's constantly changing. And as someone, because I'm still an analog photographer, but like I have to mail my film to get processed and all this stuff, and it bothers me. But it's so built into the history of the medium that I can't complain. So it was always that way. And yeah, it's massively changing, of course. I mean, the biggest thing for me, the moment was Snapchat. In some ways, it was like with my kids, it was like, wait, you're not saving it, because the whole concept was saving it. And so then just communicating with it. So like words, but like spoken words. And that was a big thing. And I actually did a little experimental project where I did with the Walker Art Center. I sold Snapchats basically, and it was quite interesting because I was like, okay, someone buys 25 Snapchats from me. What are they getting? Like, how do I make it valuable for them? And in that case, I figured out what's valuable if I tell them a secret that they can't share and they only get to see this thing. So I think you can always find new value in the way it's changing, but the way it's changing, like AI and all that stuff, I mean, I don't speculate on it. I try not to think about it, and just do my thing. Yeah. But yeah, it's radically changing, of course. Sorry, that's unsatisfying, but I'm not like a scholar of the medium in that way. Yeah. Yeah.
During COVID, I feel like there was so much just despair, and like my parents, as older people, like talked to me about, you know, like we don't know what's gonna happen, all this stuff, and I felt like a weird sort of calm because I was a photographer, because I knew that like even if the world was burning, I would probably just be taking a picture of it instead of like, you know, and like I just wonder like how photography gives you hope in that way. Like, does it feel like something that is like, no matter what happens, as long as you can do this one thing?
That's a beautiful sentiment. We're living in a little moment where I'm struggling on the hope. Struggling a little on the hope right now. But that's why, no, yes, I'm learning from you. That's good. I want to be like that. Here's what I always said in a maybe 10 years ago or something. Is people complain about like whatever political tribe you imagine, and then I always think, when I go out in the world and I encounter these people, and it's always better than I think it is. And they're always like, oh, human beings, and we connect, and there's, and then I was like, was I lying to myself this entire time? And things are much worse than they are. So I don't know the answer to that. But yeah. Try not to get negative to your very positive question, but it's a nice sentiment. Yeah. Incidentally, I really struggled during COVID as an artist, actually, and it surprised me because I'm introverted and I like being alone. I thought that would be good for me, but it turned out that I need to go out into the world and interact with people for it to come to life. Other questions? Yeah.
I have a question about like the aesthetics, the visual language you've used across a lot of your projects, and then with your new book, like the flash and the digital. Like, I think about Broken Manual and how that's so represented the idea and the people in it. And you kind of like started talking about it like you needed this to be new and the energy to be different. Like, was there like a trial and error? Like, how did you get to this certain look of like, you know, the flash, almost like blown out kind of effect? And what do you think that like gives to the subject matter?
Yeah, it's all been project specific. So basically, you know, I did Sleeping by the Mississippi, which you saw, and it was working one way, and I felt good about that, and I did another project that way, and then I started feeling like, oh, I use the analogy of like a filmmaker. It's like, okay, I've made 2 gangster movies, now I want to make a comedy or something, and I wanted to just have a different voice, and then it was a process of figuring out what that voice is and how to do it technically, basically. And I guess a big thing for me is humor. So I think there's humor in Sleeping by the Mississippi, but a lot of people don't see it. And it's viewed as somber and all that, and which is good, but it's true. But it's like humor is a big part of my way of encountering the world. So, and also self-deprecation and anxiety, like that's when I talked about those pictures of the teenagers being too soft. I didn't feel like my anxiety was coming through, because part of my anxiety is aging, and I wanted that energy in there. And so through Flash and other means, doing that, and also because I'm so project based that it's like thinking of a movie and like, how am I going to shoot this movie? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you want viewers to
No, things are going to be misinterpreted. So first of all, most people aren't, not most people, a lot of people aren't consuming the work like as a whole. They're consuming one picture at a time in a fragmentary way. And so it's kind of out of my control. I always think about when I showed Sleeping by the Mississippi and I showed Johnny Cash's Boyhood Home. And I remember years ago giving a talk in Japan, and the translator said, "Who's Johnny Cash?" And I was like, oh, right. Not everyone knows who Johnny Cash is. And then you realize, and maybe a lot of people here don't know who Johnny Cash is. And then you realize, all the meaning is being filtered in a million different ways. And I make the kind of work that I'm mostly okay with that, unless it's, so wildly off that I'm uncomfortable. Like very often it's seen as a critique of America or something. And I've never really felt it was that, but I'm okay with it. Yep.
Why did you specify in your book, Sleeping by the Mississippi, why did you specify the picture Johnny Cash's home, like in text was his home, but then for like the picture of the bed by the water?
Mm-hmm. Really great question. This question of how much information to give the viewer is a biggie. And it's something I struggle with all the time. And basically, I'm figuring it out as I go along, and each project is a little bit different. So in Sleeping by the Mississippi, there's a picture on one page, there's a title, which is generally the person's first name, if there's a person, and the location. In that particular case, same with Charles Lindbergh's Boyhood Bed. I like the idea of these children with these big lives ahead of them. I wanted to drop a little seed into the viewer's mind about that. But then in the back of the book, there are long sections that you can read about the different pictures if one is inclined to do so, but with my knowledge that most people won't. Yeah, but I never know, because you can ruin a picture by giving too much information. Yeah. Hi.
This is a question about portraiture. To me, portraiture is just the hardest photographic category to me always, because I feel if you do talk about it in binary terms, either people want to be photographed, and then that to me always feel a little bit performative, or people don't want to be photographed and they shouldn't have the shutter in the first place. And something magical I find in your portraiture is it sits comfortably somewhere in the middle. I feel like you have permission to photograph those people, but it doesn't feel performative. And then I was just thinking about what makes that happen, and why does the portraiture to me was part of it is about, I don't know, it's just I want to see your opinion, because to me it's about the exhaustion of the subject matter we're writing down on the card of their dream, waiting for the large moment to be set.
Yeah, a lot of it is just time. So it's, it's kind of like if you walk in the door, you meet someone, you're these two computers that are going wild reading data on the other person and trying to figure out threat levels and all this stuff. And I fuss around, kind of like what I was just doing right there, just fussing around, playing around, and enough time passes that goes down a bit. And so it's really just that, I think. Yeah, we can set you free. Thanks. Thank you.